Hello everyone, my name's Chris Morrison.
And my name is Jane Secker.
And we're the creators of Copyright the Card Game.
And we run the website copyrightliteracy.org, and we also tweet at UK Copyright Lit.
So if you're watching this video, it's because you're going to be playing a shorter version of Copyright the Card Game. And what we're going to do today is get you up to speed with the first 2 rounds of the game so you can really get cracking when it comes to looking at licenses and exceptions. But we're going to explain that all as we go through. So the first thing we want to say is go and have a look at the website, copyrightliteracy.org, go to the resources page and click on Copyright the Card Game. Then you'll be able to download a PDF which has all the information on it that you need to go through this video and get yourself up to speed.
Okay, so let's assume you're ready to go. And Chris, tell us a bit about what is copyright in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, well, copyright protects certain things, certain types of subject matter, and we call those works. The next thing to know is that there are activities it regulates. We call those usages. If you actually want to do any of those activities with a work, you can either use them legally with permission under a license, or you can legally use them without permission under what we call a copyright exception.
Okay.
So copyright is, well, it protects the creative outputs of the human mind when they are recorded in a fixed form. So it's the expressions in a fixed form. In order for copyright protection to arise, the work simply needs to be original, although not particularly original. There's a pretty low bar to originality, and as we mentioned, in a fixed format. It doesn't actually need to be registered. So what kind of works are protected by copyright?
Well, the full set of works cards are available from the deck that you've hopefully downloaded. Just some of the main ones: literary, artistic, musical, dramatic, broadcast, sound recording, films. But there's also a whole load of work-related cards that we have that tackle issues like moral rights and how those are protected, performance rights, and some works which are non-qualifying. Now, what we're going to do, so you can find out a bit more about copyright, we give people an object when they play the game in the room or online with us. In this instance, we're going to give you the DVD, which is George Harrison, Living in the Material World. You've just got some photos to illustrate this object here. So it's a DVD. You can see inside it. You can see some text on the back cover here. And what we want to ask you to do is go and have a look at the works cards and see if you can work out what type of works are contained within this object.
Yes.
So you might want to pause the video now.
Pause the video now, and we'll give you a moment to try and work through the cards, say which types of works apply.
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
So
you just showed them straight the art. We hope that they didn't accidentally not pause it in time. Maybe we'll give them a bit more time next time. Anyway, hopefully that all worked out well for you. So what have we got here, Jane?
So in this DVD, which, as I mentioned, it's a film. So it's definitely a film. It's got sound recordings in it, but it's also got artistic work on the front cover. It's got some text on the front cover.
Artistic works within the film itself as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a dramatic work, so the screenplay.
There's even a bit of dancing in there.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Performance rights. There's some performing going on.
There's definitely some performance you would expect there to be.
Works.
Yeah.
And moral rights arise, I think, don't they? So whose moral rights was it there, do you think, Chris?
Well, a lot of people do say, well, it's George Harrison, isn't it? He's the guy on the front cover. And yes, yeah, arguably his works, yes, are protected by moral rights as well. But if we look back at the front cover, we will see that it's said it's a Martin Scorsese picture. So a film director claiming then a thing to be their work is clearly an assertion of moral rights.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Right, so let's move on.
Let's move on to usages.
Yeah.
So usages are what are actually called restricted acts in the legislation. So why do we consider copyright usage? Well, they're actually what's in the Copyright Designs and Patents Act, the legislation. They're called restricted acts. They're the things that require the authorization of the rights holder, but we map them onto everyday language in order to understand what licenses and exceptions are available to use these works legally. So let's have a look at them. Copying, issuing copies to the public. Now that is physical copies, rental or lending, public performance. So that can be acting, musical performance, recitations, but as well, it can be things coming from speakers or showing films. But communication to the public, That's actually by means of electronic transmission, covers broadcasts and online communication. And an adaptation is when you take an existing copyright work and you create a new one that is based on it, such as a film adaptation of a book or a translation. So,
okay.
Shall we pull up the next scenario? What kind of usages apply? So let's have a look. In this case, a lecturer uploads a document to the university virtual learning environment in order for students to read it. So we'll pause for a moment, let you have a look at your cards, note down which usages you think apply, and then we'll show you our answers. So give you a moment. Okay, right.
Ready to go?
We are. Let's now reveal the answer that we have for this. It is copying and communication to the public. Clearly, it's a digital copy which is on one machine, and then it is uploaded to another machine, and others can download their own copy. So copying is taking place, but also communication to the public by means of electronic transmission. It's not the general public. It is a cohort of students, but case law has shown that the public can actually be a relatively a sort of subset of things being widely available on the internet. So we would put that in there definitely.
Okay.
Okay. Right, shall we move on to the next?
Let's move on.
We're just giving you a flavour of the next two, because actually when you play the game, you'll be really getting into the depth of licenses and exceptions.
Absolutely. So just very, very quickly, licenses. Licenses are important to think about first. They effectively provide zero risk if you've got a license. If you're in a large institution, for example, a university, you might have already paid for a certain number of licenses, but just remember they all involve limitations. They don't give you a carte blanche to do what you want. And you also may need to think about how they relate to copyright exceptions, which we'll come on to in a moment. But just a couple of the really important license cards that you'll probably be dealing with when you play the game. The Educational Recording Agency, covering broadcast recordings in schools, colleges, universities. The CLA license, the Copyright Licensing Agency license, which covers the provision of multiple copies of extracts from published books and journals, and then also your library electronic resources licenses, which will give you access to ebooks, e-journals, all sorts of other resources, subject to specific terms and conditions. Creative Commons licenses are also something that are important to think about. So these are types of open licenses where the author has basically used this license to signify that they're happy for you to reuse their work under certain conditions, usually that you give them credit. But there are more restrictive licenses which specify that you can't use the work for commercial purposes, or you can't make derivatives of the work. We'll go into Creative Commons in a bit more detail when you play the game.
So exceptions, as we said, legal uses where you don't have the permission of the copyright holder. And one of the key concepts when looking at exceptions in UK law is fair dealing. And this determines whether the usage is lawful or infringing based on how a fair-minded and honest person would deal with the work. Fair use is a term you're probably familiar with, you may have heard. That is actually a doctrine in US law. They have largely the same purpose, but fair dealing works a bit differently. So if we actually look at those provisions themselves, what you'll see is there are a number of specific reasons why you might be allowed to use a copyright work or defend your use of it, whereas fair use is actually much broader. So fair dealing here, you would look to see whether it is its quotation, is it caricature, parody or pastiche, for example. And on the next slide, what we've done is we've highlighted three exceptions which are of particular importance to education, the area that Jane and I both work in. Quotation, clearly something that happens all the time when studying and researching and learning. Illustration for instruction relates to teaching, and then educational performance related to showing, playing, performing something as part of educational activities of an educational establishment. So we've got some things there that you can rely on. You don't necessarily always need to get a license, but what that can bring in, and there's a certain uncertainty about copyright, is that it brings around the concept of risk and a need to look at how risky something is. You don't necessarily know whether what you're doing is infringing or not. You may find it difficult to get permission from a rights holder. You may be unsure of whether something is fair or not based on having a look at the different factors. It may still not be clear. So what we do is ask you to come up with a risk rating in the game. So you'll get to see how this actually works out in practice, but just to give you a flavour of how the rest of the game works.
Okay, well, we really hope to see you soon. We look forward to playing Copyright the Card Game with you. And if you want to find out a bit more about it, then do check out our website before we get to meet you.
Yeah, and all the tools, all the resources from the game are downloadable and actually are Creative Commons licensed, so you are able to use them and adapt them for your own purposes. So thank you very much and see you soon.
Yeah, bye.